Hey friends, Tiffany Dawn, and I'm really excited for today's video. I've actually tried filming it 4 times now, so I'm hoping that this time it will feel like it clicks. But I want to talk about how far is too far and how to set boundaries physically in dating relationships. And I have 4 tips that help James and I as we set our boundaries, and I'm hoping that they can help you too as you're setting your personal boundaries. So let's get started. So tip number 1 is reframe the question. So when James and I started dating, we started asking the question, how far is too far? So we knew what the Bible said about saving sex for marriage, and that was something we decided as kids that we wanted to do. But there's a whole range of things you can do before you get to actually having sex, right? Like, can you hold hands? Can you kiss? Can you make out? Can you sleep in the same bed? Can you take each other's clothes off? Like, what can you do? And so we started trying to figure out, well, what's the right answer here? We want to make sure we're doing what's right. And as we're looking through the Bible again, we realized there's not a specific Bible verse that's like, thou can hold hands, but thou must not kiss before the wedding night. There's just not something that's so specific like that. And so James and I are like, well, what's the right answer here? How far is too far? And that's when James said something that I thought was really insightful. And he said, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe instead of asking how far is too far, which is kind of like how much can I get away with without sinning, maybe instead we should be asking, how can I honor God in this dating relationship? How can we honor God even in our physical relationship in dating with what we do and what we don't do? And I love that because it totally changes the focus. How far is too far is kind of me-centered, right? It's like, well, what can I do? What can I get away with? But how can I honor God becomes very God-centered. Lord, I want to honor you in this area of my life. Teach me how to do that. And that helps push you closer to God as well. And I think as you seek God for that, He'll start to make that clear to you through your conscience, through conversations with other people, as you read His Word, that will start to become clear. So that brings us to tip number 2, which is use the biblical principles. So there's a lot of principles we see in the Bible that can be applied to this situation. So 3 in particular that come to mind are, number 1, fleeing temptation. So are the boundaries that you put in place, are they encouraging temptation? Are they putting you in the way of temptation? Or are they encouraging you to flee from temptation? So one example for us personally is we decided not to sleep in the same bed before we got married, not to stay overnight sleeping in bed together. And the reason for that was because we felt like that for us would not be fleeing temptation. It would be opening a door for us to want to run through toward temptation instead of away from it, especially because the more tired you get and at night your inhibitions go down a little bit and you're more inclined to do things that you might not do in the middle of the day. And so we found that for us, fleeing temptation meant not sharing a bed together. Another biblical principle is really loving the people around you. So asking the question am I loving my significant other in the way we're going about our physical relationship? My mentors once told me a guy should be sending you home with a clean conscience every night. That should be one of his goals. And that's a way to love somebody. So asking, am I sending James home with a clean conscience? Is he sending me home with a clean conscience? Are we loving each other by not pushing each other's boundaries, but by helping each other be faithful to them? And a third biblical principle that we found was looking for wise counsel and not trying to make all these decisions on our own with what felt right to us, but really getting wise counsel from other people that we trusted. And that brings me to tip number 3, which is interview some wise, trusted people. So this might sound super weird and like nothing that a normal human being would ever do, and that's okay because I'm not normal. I have never claimed to be and I never will be. And I love going around and asking people questions about their life so I can learn from them. So one of the weird things I did that was actually super helpful is James and I sat down with several couples who were married and asked them, what were your boundaries before you got married, and what do you wish they had been, and why? And it was actually really interesting to hear all their answers. So I'll just share with you a few of the thoughts that we got from people. So one couple actually waited for their first kiss on their wedding night. I think they held hands before they got married, but they saved the first kiss for the wedding. Another couple had wanted to save sex for marriage, but ended up having sex with each other before they got married. And we were really intrigued by this situation because we're like, well, you still married each other, so what was that like for you? And they said something really interesting. They said for them personally, it actually caused a lot of hurt that they needed to work through because they said that they were going to wait till marriage, but then they didn't. So it felt like a breakdown in trust and communication, and like there was some hurt that they had to work through, even though they ended up marrying each other. And that was really interesting to us. And then we found couples kind of in the middle. We found couples who didn't share a bed before marriage, couples who didn't touch each other where the other person's undergarments went, couples who didn't take each other's clothes off, didn't see each other naked or even partially naked before marriage. And it was so cool to get to hear from different people what they had done, what they were glad they did, what they wished they had done. That was so helpful. And it's so important to find outside wise advice and realize that the way that you live your life now will have an impact on the future. And that's not to say there's not healing and forgiveness. Like, God makes everything new, and He forgives and restores. And I actually have a video linked down below called Sex If You Want to Wait Again. So if you're in a place where you're like, I've had sex before, I wish I hadn't, I want to start over, that video is for you. And so there is just, God can make everything new, but the choices that we make now will affect us in the future. And so instead of trying to make the choice all on your own, it's so helpful to find people you trust to get their wise opinion. And the last tip is start the conversation ahead of time, but make sure it's an ongoing conversation. So you want to start having this conversation toward the beginning of your relationship, so that you're not like in the moment, the heat of the moment, and you're like, what are our boundaries? I have no idea. We haven't talked about it. You want to actually talk about it before you get into that place. But you also want to keep talking about it. Keep having the conversation. Check in with each other. Like, how are things going? Is there anything you've been convicted about? Is there anything on your heart or that you're feeling guilty about, or that you think we should do differently to really honor God in our relationship? And just keep that conversation going. And that's a way to love the person that you're dating too. So in closing, a question that I get a lot is, was it worth waiting to have sex until your wedding? Because that is what James and I ended up doing. We saved sex for marriage. And our wedding night was the first time we got naked together, the first time we touched each other in certain places, the first time we shared a bed together for the night. And it was so beautiful and special and intimate. And my answer to that question is, I have no regrets about that. Yes, it was worth the wait with all my heart. I say yes. And that doesn't mean that it was the best sex we'd ever have in our lives, because sex is something that you practice and you get better at. But it was so special to get to start that journey together. And we didn't wish we'd practice with other people, because sex is very personal. And so it's me learning what James likes and him learning what I like. And it's been so special to get to go on that journey together. And so if you are also a couple who's engaged and you're saving sex for marriage, I have a video series for you. It's called The Wedding Night Talks, and it is $24.99. It's linked down below, and it's basically 10 videos that share everything we would want you to know about sex before your wedding to help you have a great sex life in marriage, because that is our goal and our heart for every married couple, to have an amazing sex life in marriage. And that's what this video series is all about. So girls, I hope that this can encourage you. Comment below your thoughts, what you would add to this conversation about setting boundaries in dating relationships. Love you girls, and see you next week. Bye.